like to call the meeting of the work session of the board to order. And I think our first item on the agenda is what counts next steps.
Nope, it's social media update.
What's that?
No, the social media update.
Oh, where are we?
We're at the very top. Here. Oh, you have an old agenda.
Oh, I got an old agenda. Somebody.
Yeah, just look on your, it's up on.
Sorry about that. We got an old agenda. I messed up.
Changed quite a few times.
I
It's
messed
changed.
up. I messed up. I
I'm
messed
sorry.
up.
No.
Okay, social media update. Sorry.
Everybody else have a good one? I need to do that.
Thank you. Some board docs? Thank you.
Good afternoon. We are here to share some recommendations from the Social Media Committee. And Jen Sturge is here in case you have technical questions. Her expertise in that regard is much greater than my own. But last spring, at the direction of the Board of Education, the Social Media Committee was tasked with looking at a couple of social media tools, namely Facebook and Twitter, and to see what their facility would be for communicating with our community, our families, and even to some extent our students. And to do this, our committee tapped into its own expertise here and the IT department and those who work in instructional technology. And we also looked at what other systems were doing. So we looked at our neighboring systems. We had a visit with the Anne Arundel County Public Schools. We looked at a survey that was done by Wycomico County. And then we certainly had a number of discussions about about how this might work in our school system. And what we decided to do, the superintendent decided to do a pilot of Twitter. So that's the first one I'm going to address. Our Twitter pilot was implemented at the system level, so it wasn't schools, it was just only the system level. I will tell you that it was fairly lightly advertised. We announced on our website that we were going to have a Twitter account that people could go and visit. And our period of the pilot was relatively brief, and so we'll share those numbers with you. The other thing that was decided is that what we would tweet was exclusively sort of good news. So when we had students who won contests or when we had kids who were going to be participating in a particular type of activity, that was the kind of information that we were tweeting. And you can see one of the examples was the history fair, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So the pilot period of time was only April 16th through July 2nd. And we still have a Twitter account, and so we've still been doing some tweeting afterwards. But the statistics that you will see, I'll give you a few updates, but that they are from that pilot period of time. During that time, we accumulated 229 followers. And right now we are up to 274. Now, we have not re-advertised since that first period of time, so probably the additional ones that we have are either people sort of looking for Calvert County Public Schools or word of mouth. And in that period of time, we sent out 71 tweets. Since then, we've retweeted an additional 20 tweets. And given that we are just getting back into the school year, certainly a school system is going to have less information to disseminate during the summer than what they would during the school year. So I expect that will pick up. Now, these are the statistics that we wanted to share with you. In that 2.5 months of the pilot, we had 50 posts that had a link associated with them. A good example of a link would be when we would link to like our history fair results. So we would talk about the fact that Calvert County History Fair had just happened, and then send the folks to those results via link. The number of clicks that we had on tweets that we sent out were 644, and clicks per link was 12.8, so over 12.8. So, in the highest number of clicks, and my past role as supervisor of social studies, I didn't plant this, but it just so happens that the highest number of clicks was on the history fair, and I think that's a good example of our community wanting to go and find the good news of what our teachers and students are producing. So, with that said, the number of times that CalvertNet tweets have been retweeted And I'm assuming that you are familiar with this terminology. I know for a lot of people on the committee, we were just learning that, but that's when people see something and they want to share it with others. That was 148 times. And the highest number of retweets, which is hard to say, was 45. And you can imagine how many of the folks who were doing that were students, because it was the last day of school. So the last bit of statistics that we'll share is in that same time frame. You can see that Calvert tweets have been favored 48 times, and that's in that 2.5 month period. And again, the last day of school was the popular choice. So I think what's really important is what do we do with Twitter in terms of moving forward. These are some of the observations that the person who did that tweeting process for us found. They found that in the first week of setting up the account, that it took several hours per day to set it up and monitor and make sure it's working well. And I think that's important information, but it's also information to sort of set aside at this point because we now have a Twitter account. So whatever we do moving forward, that's not going to be an issue. These other bullets are an issue to some extent because anytime you put something like this in place and you're using it as a communication tool, it's going to require staff to do that. But you can see that the time demands for staff after that initial period of time are relatively light. Since then, approximately 15 minutes per day is what is required to manage the process of checking the account, monitoring feeds, and that sort of thing. And then it gives you a breakdown on the slide. You see that it gives you a breakdown of what different actions typically take. Posts with only text generally take about 10 minutes to accomplish. Posts with links to a website generally take about 20 minutes to accomplish. Posts with documents to be posted and linked generally take 20 to 30 minutes. And so we're talking about, with the volume of tweeting that we're anticipating, we're talking about probably not more than somewhere between 15 and 45 minutes of staff time for us to use this as a tool of communication. Okay? And
Per day.
I think I went
Per day, yeah.
Interesting. I think my
per day.
daughter could probably do 100 tweets in 15 minutes.
Well, and you sort of stole the words right out of my mouth because I think that's where we are at the beginning of this. I think that, and Jen can talk to us a little bit more if you have questions for her, but I think as our capacity with this grows, as we become more comfortable with it, I don't think it's gonna require that much staff time. Plus, we're not looking at tweeting on the volume that probably individuals who truly use this as a tool of communicating with their friends are going to do. So the bottom line really with that is that we don't anticipate this is going to be a huge demand on our staff to monitor this type of communication. And I've used that phrase a couple times and I'll come back to it a couple times more. This is a form of communication. And so this one is the one that we think is manageable. So I'm foreshadowing our recommendation is that we broaden this. But before I do that, I wanted to share with you what is happening in our neighboring counties. You can see that Charles County Public Schools has 1,527 followers, and that's from the time that they initiated the program till the time that this was put together, which was midsummer. St. Mary's County has 544. So while our number is not that great, I would remind you that, again, up until now, we really haven't publicized this widely through school newsletters, through some messaging in the paper, and so on. And I think that we can expect our number to grow significantly thereafter. With that, I want to turn your attention to our mission to communicate. And I think a lot of times when you're talking about new technologies, they take on sort of a mystery that is outside of really what they are. Twitter is a tool of communication. We use School Messenger to communicate. We use our website to communicate. We use school newsletters to communicate. We have lots of different ways that we communicate with families. And in all of those instances, someone has to be responsible for putting together a cogent, articulate message that they want the community to hear. Twitter really is no different. Facebook is different, and I'll get to that in a few moments, but Twitter is really no different. It's another methodology for communicating with our families and with our students and with our community, And it's one that a lot more people are accessing. So it gives us one more point of access. And having said that, we are going to recommend that we move forward with a fuller implementation of Twitter because it gives us an opportunity to communicate in one more way with our community. And we're going to advocate that we move forward both on a system level and on a school level. What that would look like on the system level is that we would, again, advertise that we have a Twitter account. We would tweet out information not only that is related to good news kinds of events, but among the kinds of information that we would tweet is system-wide information. That would be things like departmental information. An example that we learned from Anne Arundel County is they also, during the summer, have a 4-day work week. They went with a 4-day work week for the same reason that Calvert County Public Schools did it, was to save energy. And one of the tweets that they sent out that served two purposes was they tweeted that the end of the 4-day work week was coming soon, and I forget what the date was, but the point was is they were letting people know that they would be back in business 5 days a week, but they added that they saved some hundreds of thousands of dollars by doing that. And for anybody in the community might think that the 4-day work week was about, having an extra day off. It reminded them of why that school system did that. It also told them we're back to regular schedule. That's a really good example of system-wide information. It's also an opportunity to remind parents of things that are coming due. Emergency forms, certain kinds of applications, and those things that are relevant across the school system. It's a good reminder of upcoming events. SAT dates are dates that are consistent across schools. That would be a good example. Half days. I know as a parent, it's easy to forget those, especially when you have younger kids, and you have daycare issues and those sorts of things that you have to think about. So it's another way of reminding parents of that information. And it's especially a good tool for our secondary schools because at the elementary level, we do have those Tuesday folders or whatever day they send home. And parents are very good about going through that because they're babies at that point. But when they get to be teenagers and that sort of thing, we don't have quite the same level of communications that we can be assured that a family is getting. So any reminder that we can send is a good one. So again, that's the kind of reminder, and then also countywide events. If we want to give an update about the fact that the Science Fair, Science Expo is happening, so that people come by and see what our kids are doing. So it's not just for the kids who are participating and their parents, but for members of the community. And then certainly it is one more way of communicating urgent information. And we distinguish between urgent information and emergency information. There are certain emergencies that we're not going to tweet. But certainly if we have an early closing because of snow, or if we're going to close school because of snow or those kinds of things, that's the kind of urgent announcement that is going to go out through all of the normal mechanisms, but it's also going to go out through Twitter. Right now, things that we post on our news feed automatically get tweeted. So it's not even that in terms of staff time. Those kinds of things don't require any additional staff time because it's automatically linked. But that is, as we promote Twitter as one more way we're communicating, many more families are going to have that coming straight to them when we post it on the website. Now, some other considerations we had at the system level was, what do we do in terms of following? And what we said is that we're going to require our recommendation, if the board follows through with the recommendation to have this full implementation of Twitter, what we would recommend is that as a school system that we require our schools to follow the school system. So the things that we're tweeting that would also be picked up on their pages as they're setting up their Twitter accounts if they choose to do so. And then the second thing is that we talked a lot about who we would follow and whether that was a good idea because there's sort of an implicit endorsement in terms of following folks. And we thought that would be something where we wouldn't say we would never follow another organization. But right now, the only organization we thought that we would be inclined to follow was MSDE. And we would be very cautious, and that would be a decision of, if we were going to follow another organization, it would be something that would be decided at the executive level, because that's how much we thought it was probably not something that we would want to do a great deal. We even talked about whether we would follow other school systems. So whether we, and that was, again, something that a decision could be made in that regard. But right now, our recommendation is just MSDE. And the same thing would go for things like what would we retweet. That would be information that we would, that we would have coming in from other systems that we would decide to turn around and retweet. And that oftentimes would be things like SATs or information about the Common Core, those sorts of items. So far, any questions for me? Okay.
I think, yeah, just a question.
To retweet something, you're going to need to be, not necessarily, but in all likelihood, you need to be following that organization to be able to retweet them.
Right, and that's why I presented those two things together, because right now, what would we retweet? It would be something that would come from us from MSDE. If we chose to follow something like Achieve or the organizations that support the park assessments or those sorts of things, then that might be other information. That's why we put out there Common Core as an example. But right now, most of the real pertinent information that has to do with park assessments or with the Common Core are coming to us through MSDE, and so I think those two things would be linked.
And would you follow our schools that choose to go?
It's interesting. We had a conversation about that, and I don't think we really reached a resolution. We talked about why would we not want to follow our schools, and do you have anything to?
I felt that we should follow our schools because they are a part of our system, and so it's a community. But I don't know that we came to a conclusion as to what the best answer to that was.
What were the negatives discussed, if I may ask? Just too many tweets?
I'm hesitating to answer the question because I know we didn't come to a resolution, but I also don't think that I don't think that there were any real reservations that that came up. We just really I don't want to say that we decided this is what we should do because we talked about it, but we didn't resolve that issue.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I can't think of any good reason why we would not follow our schools, and certainly we talked about the fact that we would require them to follow us. But I can't tell you the committee that we had a stated resolution to that particular question.
Scott, I had a question. Do you have any information on the 229, was it, people? Are they students? Are they faculty? Are they community, parents?
I can't give you exact statistics on that. What I can tell you is that they were all of the above. We did have a number of students who were followers. Did you have specifics on that?
I don't, but it was, I would say at least a third were students who were following Calvert.
Good. And any parents?
Yes.
That's the PR part that we talked about we didn't really do. We didn't get it out to the public, right?
I think we're going to have. I think we'll have a substantial increase in followers, and they will primarily be among our parents and our students.
Yeah.
But it doesn't surprise me that a lot of our students, and as a matter of fact, I think that this is one of those tools. There are some tools that we have out there that are allowing us to access our parents pretty effectively now. But we need as many tools as we can use to remind our students of upcoming dates, and this is one of those tools that they use a great deal. So it doesn't surprise me that we would have a good amount of students signing up for that as we make it more public. Okay. Now the other recommendations that we have in terms of moving forward on a systemic level is that we still will designate one person to manage the Twitter account and to post tweets and that sort of thing. And right now, that would be the person who handles our public information and our press releases and that sort of thing, Ms. Bennett. And then we would develop a process whereby tweets, the guidelines for schools to follow what we're doing at the central office level. And that's really, that's what our plan is systemically. So again, our recommendations is that we do move forward with our Twitter account, that we do a much better job of advertising it, and that we have schools follow us as well, and that we would limit the number that we're following, at least initially. Okay. The other recommendation we have is that we would also provide this opportunity for schools. We would allow, and I want to emphasize a couple of terms here. We would allow CCPS schools the option. We didn't want to require a school at this point to establish a Twitter account. And in part, it's because our schools have different levels of resources. At the high school level, there are more administrative personnel, there's more staff that can help out with that process. As you move down into middle and elementary, certainly there is fewer staff. Now, that doesn't mean that the elementaries would not want to create a Twitter account, but we didn't feel like at this point we wanted to make it a requirement for them. But we did want to establish the opportunity for them to create an account based on guidelines that we would create at the central office. And what we would recommend that they tweet is the same kinds of information: good news about their school, informational items about their school, reminders for parents, reminders of upcoming school events, and then certainly they would be also tasked with retweeting the kinds of things that we're sending out as a system. And we felt like this was a prudent move because, again, Twitter is a form of communication. The same skill sets that we would want our principals to apply to writing an article for the newsletter or for the message that they put out on school messenger is the same skill set that we would expect that they would apply to developing a tweet and sending it out. And again, we would have sort of the same requirement for them at this point that they not give an implicit endorsement to any other site by following it. We did actually talk about having whether or not, I don't know if schools would want to follow other schools, but we would certainly allow any of our schools to follow the other schools within the school system and then require that they follow us as a central office or a school system. Okay? And the next step for us, if this is a recommendation that you choose to approve, well, we would create a specific set of guidelines that each school would have to follow, including having a standard naming convention that we would apply across all schools for setting up their accounts.
Do we have that same criteria for websites? Because I know that a lot of the websites are managed by a volunteer in the schools, at least at the elementary level. I don't know how they get them done at the high school level. But I don't think we want volunteers in charge of tweeting. Is it going to be restricted to the principal or
It wouldn't
designee?
be restricted to the principal, but it also would not be something that we would give out to a volunteer. The principal would have to designate someone to be in charge of this communication, and that would be somebody on their staff.
On staff, okay.
Yeah, definitely staff. There would be no way we would have volunteers, no.
So with
Okay.
that, sorry.
Oh, no, sorry.
I was going to say, with that, our recommendation is that obviously that not only we extend this to our school system, but to our schools. And I wanted to take a quick moment, but I'm going to transition to what our recommendation is related to Facebook right now. But if there are any other Twitter questions, we can answer them now.
No,
Okay.
we should go forward.
The Facebook discussion for us right now, our recommendation is much briefer. We talked to a couple of schools, again, most specifically Anne Arundel County Public Schools, about Facebook pages. And what we found is that they felt as that they were very useful. Those who had a Facebook page found them to be very useful tools for communication, but there was a very big but involved in that. And they also said that they required full-time monitoring. The difference with Facebook is it's a two-way communication, and you can have things posted on your page. Those are things that you might want to have removed depending on what they are. You're going to want to block that person who might have sent something inappropriate. And so while they found it to be a good form of communication, only if they could monitor it very closely. And at this time, we don't have a dedicated department or even a single staff member that we could have on call almost 24 hours a day to make sure, certainly up before most people rise, and looking at this consistently throughout the day to make sure that we are not messaging something unintentionally. So our recommendation right now is that we study whether we would use Facebook in the future as we move forward, but our recommendation is not to adopt that as a form of communication at this time.
Is there any way of making the settings so that you could send Facebook posts out but nobody can comment on it?
Not anymore to my knowledge. There used to be, but I think they have changed their
Because if you could do that, then it would work perfect.
Right. You
But
used
it's
to be
not
able to
possible. If
build
you
a
gotta have somebody
page.
answering questions
Yeah,
back and
they've
forth,
changed
like you said, it's a full-time job.
Right.
Now, Facebook mandates that every page remains a social page, meaning allowing commenting.
And social media, I think, comes with some inherent risks, but it also comes with a lot of options for us. And I think we're going to continue to investigate those that give us a great option for communicating and sort of mitigate the risk for our systems. And that's why we recommend Twitter, but right now not Facebook. That's it.
Is that it?
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Do we
Thank you.
need a vote on the recommendation, or are we good? Do we need a vote on the recommendation? Or do you go forth and do it, or?
Oh, I don't know if I wasn't sure if that was something that you would vote on here, if you would go back and have some discussions, but certainly our recommendation is to move forward however you choose to approve that or deny it.
Then I make a recommendation that we accept the Right, I make a motion that we accept the recommendation.
Okay, Mr.
Second.
Denali moves, second by Mr. Blyer. Any discussion?
So Gail, when we first got our Twitter account, we did not send out a press release?
We did. We did.
I thought I saw something.
When we first established it, we did, but we have done nothing since then
Okay.
to, encourage
Promote it.
schools through their other communication to advertise it to, get more followers. So that's something we would do now is not just do a press release, but probably encourage our schools to put it in their newsletters, put it in their school messenger.
Send it out on Messenger.
And really
Right. On school
make
messenger.
that much more visible so people are aware of what we're doing.
Leverage.
It's moved and seconded, we adopt the right recommendation. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, that was a long time coming. It took a
Next is
year
what
of
council
discussion,
next
remember?
steps?
Thank you.
Minute.
Good afternoon.
As you may recall, we've talked about the what counts process for a good while now, and you got a draft report a while ago. And the last conversation we had formally with the board was that you would talk about the next steps, because the next steps really are the conclusion of the written report. So the report is in draft form, which you got several months ago, and I know Dr. Smith said we'd be back to talk about next steps. So that's where we are here today, and I know Ms. Highsmith has some, can tell you some things that have already occurred as a result of the reports and the findings that we've had, and then some ideas for moving forward.
Well, Tracy, I know that you and Gail are going to be presenting to MABE in Ocean City in October about our whole process of what counts. I'm excited to have that because I think other boards are going to be interested in hearing how our process went, because it was a very, very enlightening process. I think we learned a lot. One piece that we did do this summer in A&S, we shared a lot of those comments that were made by students and parents with the administrative staffs. And we talked a lot about what the commonalities were of both the students and parents, and where they and how they felt about the school system, and what they were expecting the behaviors from our staff. We have decided that every month, and we just sent out a on the net, and I'm not sure if you saw it or not, but we are going to every month incorporate the good and the bad,
And that's a good,
and let the staff know these were the good things that people felt about what was going on, and then these are the other things, so that they can stop the negatives. So we can just stop and have them pause on that. Another step, and this kind of falls into topics for CAC, so I know Gail's going to talk a lot more about CAC, but that's another part of next steps would be, these will be topics that the CAC too will now be investigating, and we would hope they would continue on with that work. And all of this will be communicated to our schools and our staff.
and the report is up on the website, right?
It is not, the report is not finalized yet, because we don't have the next steps conclusion of the
Oh.
report. So no, it's not. After your conversation, if you had other ideas of, what you would like us to be doing with the results, we'll add that to the next steps piece, and then it will be on the website.
Well, I do have a question about the information that was collected from the parents and the students really identified types of behavior they really seek in their schools. And I'm not thinking in terms of teacher evaluation, because I know we can't mess with teacher evaluation, but are there opportunities for principals in schools to help their staff reflect on their behaviors and using that sort of as the model? This is what we're looking for. Or is that not, I'd like to see it as part of professional development, and maybe not a formal program of professional development, but that there would be, the principals would be aware of it, they'd be looking for it, those kinds of things.
That has not been established, but we certainly that can be part of our next steps, and it can obviously be part of ongoing A&S meetings, that as we go through the year, that we look at this and talk about how are you helping develop your
Yes.
staffs for this. Absolutely, we can go that way.
That would be fantastic.
I think it could also be used departmentally for the same purpose in the same way, because as you recall, the report kind of had two different
Correct.
sections. One had the general characteristics, but the others, is very interesting, just to remind the public that students and adults responded on sheets individually, and it was by category of employees. So there were some very interesting things said about sponsors of extracurricular activities. There were interesting things said about guidance counselors or about bus drivers, for example. And those could be used by departments in the same way with the same type of professional development, because those comments were very focused to a job responsibility as opposed to a more global characteristic.
Anything else? If not, we'll move to,
Do
The
we want to talk about the CAC piece now, or wait until?
Yeah, it's next.
next.
That's next.
Okay.
Next
Yeah.
agenda
Okay,
item.
excellent.
Yes.
So if you're finished with what counts, we'll go ahead and finalize the report, get it up on the website, and then we'll have it to take with us, which would
Absolutely.
be a very good thing.
Yes.
CAC.
CAC, as you recall, you appointed the committee at the last meeting, so they're all set to go. Their first meeting is the 23rd of September. We have a full committee, which is wonderful. We have our students named now, so they're ready to go as well. And as you recall, every year, the board sets an assignment for the CAC. At the meetings, we really kind of divide the meeting into kind of two sections. One generally is a presentation by staff of things maybe we would like them to be aware of, because we think that there are things that our system's doing that are of general interest to the community, and it's information to inform them and also enable them to answer a few questions that they might hear out in the community, and Common Core is a good example of something like that. The other, and we do budget every year. Prior to the superintendent's public budget presentation, we go through it with the CAC, get their input, their feedback, give them information so they have a fuller understanding. The other part of the meeting is generally more on a topic that the board sets that you want to get more information about from the community, and they spend some time doing in-depth. Often that topic spans multiple meetings. Sometimes the committee has one topic they do basically all year long, which is what happened last year. They did Common Core and how to effectively communicate information about Common Core to the community. And in some years, it's been 2 or 3 topics because they've been smaller. So they might spend 2 meetings on a topic. So we're here today to discuss what the topic or topics may be for the CAC study this year. And Ms. Highsmith has ideas on that as well.
Well, as we talked about the what counts, I think it's very important that I would like to see the CAC delve more into that type of, from the community. I want more response back from the community on those different things, how Gail had set up with the what counts, the, help me get, what were those, they were a whole different set of criteria that
Right.
people were commenting on. And I would like to use those with the CAC. I would like to have them, let's take one, let's say for September 23rd, and let's talk about that. What's your feeling? Do you feel comfortable going out and talking to your stakeholders? Because we did this through the board, but there's a lot of people didn't participate in that. And so I'd rather have a much larger feedback audience of what's happening out there on these particular topics. Would be one of the things that we can work on. But that was my idea. I would like to see this, what counts, it be expanded.
Sure.
We did that with the previous What Counts in 2011 and got some very good in-depth information because, the What Counts Forum is a 2-hour session. And we get very good information, but it's not as deep as it could be. And I know another thing we talked about also was the continuation of Common Core.
Oh, the communication piece,
Communication piece
absolutely.
as we move
yes.
through the year.
Because MSDE is giving us a whole lot of information, and we want to make sure that we have a common communication piece that is going out and that it's not piecemeal, that, this school's doing this and this school, et cetera, because we are getting right now bombarded by MSDE with all kinds of facts and information, and we need to go through and say, okay, this is what we need to get out there because this is what's most important now. But it's just, I think I'm almost getting to the point of being overwhelmed by the
Well,
amount.
it's constantly changing too.
Yes, the State Department
Well, I
does
think the
change.
CAC is going to have is maybe coming forward with that recommendation also. The Common Core is getting a lot of press now.
Correct.
Especially with the scores released in New York City, or New York State. So I would expect them to have a lot of questions. And it would be an excellent forum to have just continued discussions.
Absolutely.
Just keep discussing it, dispel a lot of the fears, dispel a
Yes.
lot of the misconceptions.
Absolutely.
So that would mean that we'd have to have some heavy hitters from the instructional side
Absolutely.
at these meetings, that can answer the questions on how is it really being implemented in our school system.
They also, CAC members have valuable insights to offer in what it is parents want to know
Oh.
and when they want to know it.
They're-
Because
as well
we
as the
can't just,
students, yeah.
You just-
bombard them
Correct.
like we're getting bombarded. It's so
Yes.
overwhelming that it doesn't sink in. So they're extremely helpful.
One
with
of the
that.
CAC's suggested topics was student leadership enrichment. I know that was something we put on their list of things to do last year, and they did not have time. I'd like to ask that they, if time permits, that they look into that too, to see if we're giving students opportunities within our schools to be leaders, not just through SGA, but in other activities.
Okay.
So there's three potential things.
Huh?
So they've gotten three things.
That's
that
3
they're-
things, is that,
How about evaluation? Have we done that to death now? Or
what evaluation?
student evaluation, teacher evaluations, administrative evaluation?
We haven't.
That is
really-
an
We
ongoing-
haven't done that with CAC, other than to just touch on it, to let them
Right.
know. That might be a good informational piece
Yeah.
in the meeting, to just keep them up to date on what's happening with it.
Kind of
But,
important.
it's certainly not probably something we want them to study
No,
per
no.
se.
Correct. I mean, because that's really being dictated by
Right, right.
the state. So, I mean, we can certainly just keep them apprised of what that process
That's
is.
But I
Anything
think
else?
3 topics might be overwhelming.
Right.
That's what I'm worried about.
So do we have to choose?
Well, I think you should at least prioritize.
Okay.
Well, the first one that you said is just sort of like something that can be handled within 15 minutes of their each monthly meeting.
Correct.
The second one, as far as Common Core, could really be like.
That could
you
be
know,
an
Whole
all.
thing.
Well, that might be like the math department says, how's it going? And let's discuss what was just put in the Washington Post yesterday or something, So just general concerns and stuff. As far as a long-term study goes, perhaps they could tackle the student leadership. So I don't know how that comes out as far as priorities go. But does that sound reasonable?
I don't know enough about the conduct of the CAC meetings to know if that sounds like a lot of stuff still, even,
last year with the Common Core, and you were at some of the meetings, the presentations take a little while because it's complicated. And the question and answer period took a while because it's complicated. And, you know, the members were very curious and had a lot of important things to say. It's a more extended conversation by nature of, you know, the subject matter.
Well, I think Common Core I would say that would be number one, because we're just in the throes of it, and we need to make sure that, we can't wait to find out later that it wasn't being communicated well. Or,
Correct. I think that would be,
I agree with that.
They may be tired of it.
I don't know, I think they had on there, one of their recommendations is that they be somewhat instrumental in helping to do some of the communication
Patients,
pieces. So I
yes.
think that is on their list of continuing
Okay.
that piece. I don't think they were weary of it at all.
Okay, good.
yeah, they even specify for students with special needs as being
Yes.
part of what they would like to look into. So I don't object to them taking that path if that's where the CAC wants to go. So then what counts, and then the leadership piece?
If they can,
Everyone's-
if they have the time.
if they have the time.
Is that
Okay, so we
okay?
prioritize Common Core, what counts, and then the student leadership.
Next year, we'll put
Okay.
student leadership at the top.
Satisfied with that? I think that ends the work session then. I think we need to,
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Thank you.
need to go into exec session again if we want to make a motion.
I'll make a motion for the Board of Education of Calvert County to go into closed session to discuss personnel actions, legal to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice, as permitted by the Maryland Open Meetings Act, Section 10-508A1 and 7 of the State Government Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, and Section 10-503 of the State Government Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland.
Is there a second?
Second.
Shall I second? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, motion carried. We're in exec session.